And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Valley of the Judged. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me is my good brother here in the temple, the man behind the tribunal, and the man behind the monthly adventures, good brother Monarch.
If at any point you are listening to this stream and think either me or Mildred are having a fucking stroke, we are fine. We are just attempting to pronounce Welsh words.
Yeah. Also, hey there, Lunatic Inferno. Welcome to the madness, and I hope you enjoy your time. I came here for the hair. Well, you're definitely gonna get plenty of that. But I will note this well in advance. Legends of Avallen, which I'm going to be calling it because that's what I called it when I did my interview with Darren Ozturk multiple times, is a high fantasy affair that is very much themed around a not just Celtic fantasy, but also Celtic fantasy by way of a legally distinct Rome occupying the islands, or at least having some parts of the islands colonized. This also means that it is inspired by Celtic and Welsh mythology and language, which also means there's a pronunciation guide for it, and we are going to try our best. We're not going to do all that great, because it's not a language that I speak all that much.
I'm already confused in the double L because there's a very specific pronunciation for how to say a double L in. But when you look at the Avallen, it'll have like the pronunciation right next to it.
Mm-hmm.
It pronounces it as we would pronounce a double L, and not how they described earlier.
Language is weird.
Yeah, I'm not faulting the guide itself for that. How else is this just a weird thing to try to do?
Now, in the interest of full disclosure, also hello there, Mika. I will note that I did interview the creator multiple times, both for the original Legends of Avallen and for its expansion, A Faith Seeker's Guide to Avallen. And also for its big module Against the Fairy Queen. I should note that with several of these, there's the option of using its in-house system or using 5e. We are not doing the latter for reasons that I think are plenty obvious to people who are familiar with this channel. But for those of you who are new here, I have very little interest in being yet another D&D 5e channel. There's enough of that to go around. I don't feel like adding to that pile, and, well, Wizards of the Coast doesn't like me. That, and I am a TTRPG guy, not a D&D guy. Despite what some might claim, there is a difference. But, and I should of course note that I backed all 3 projects. Excuse me. Now, this Quickstart was made before the core game came out, so some of the art is a little bit stock. But I don't plan on covering the full book just yet. And I will admit, one of the other reasons I wanted to cover this is so I had an excuse to cover a game that uses cards instead of dice. Which for a lot of people that idea seems a bit strange, but there aren't as many card-based games as I would like, but there's certainly a few of them. And personally, I think there should be more, because everybody's got a set of playing cards somewhere in the house, or a way to get one. I mean, you can get them at a gas station, for God's sake. It's not that hard to get like a standard bicycle playing card deck.
Probably easier than getting a set of dice for other games.
Mm-hmm.
I will note, they do give us 2 different ways to play this online in the card deck, or like playing card emulator or role game. We won't go through all the steps, but
Yeah.
I'm happy these are here.
I know it says due to recent global events. Keep in mind that this Quick Start came out right around the time of the lockdowns, so there's that. And we have a nice little map of Avallen. And when it comes to the options, you have using playingcards.io or Roll20. But Avallen itself, and you can see it, we have the way it's pronounced there, which runs counter to the pronunciation guide for Welsh that we saw earlier. But Inspired by Celtic Britain, Avallen is a island home to the Valak, a divided Iron Age people in constant conflict. The Valak clans are scattered across Avallen's diverse biomes, worshipping gods that embody the lands, enchanted forests hosting mischievous fae and druidic rituals, rolling meadows scattered with earthen fortresses and cattle-raiding Valak queens, mountains shrouded in mist, hiding ancient sanctuaries and terrifying beasts, and so many more. Then there is the Otherworld, a place of legends that lies parallel to Avallen, the domain of their gods, the Ever-Ones. It serves as the final resting place for the spirits of the dead, but also the birthplace of creatures of myth such as the dreaded Beathra and the Trixie Fae. The Valak believe were the ancestors are reborn as Fae, with the greatest of them becoming Tolthwith Weg. I told you I was going to screw up pronunciation. Tolthwith Teg. They are still cautious and sometimes hostile in their dealings with them. There are many stories of unwitting travelers who wander into this unearthly realm, never to be seen again. Or so rattled, they never wish to speak of their experiences as long as they live. Avallen is not all nature, magic, and mysticism, though. A new kind of peoples have settled on their shores, the Raxian Empire, whose concrete buildings, urban living, taxes, and other cultural oddities made landfall on Avallen from the mainland to the east a generation ago. As the Valak always have been, their response was divided. Some welcomed the Empire with their technology and power onto their land, while other clans put aside ancient rivalries to stand up against the invaders. In the midst of these tumultuous times, your tale is just beginning. And of course, then we get into the how to play part, which is self-explanatory for a lot of things.
Grab a deck of cards to kind of help explain how you're going to be using cards.
Mm-hmm.
When you take a risky action, one that could succeed but is made challenging by another character or environment, you make a check to determine how well you do by drawing cards from a deck of regular playing cards. A deck can be shared between players, or each player can use their own. Each deck needs all cards from each suit, as well as 2 jokers. Designate one joker as red and the other as black. Each suit of the deck represents an important attribute of your character that can be tested when making a deck, or making a check. Red suits are physical attributes, while black suits are mental. Hearts is your vigor, physical strength, and endurance. Diamonds represent your agility. Spades your spirit. And clubs your wit. Your attributes are laid out on your character sheet in the same way as the table above. Attributes that are diagonal from each other are opposite, sharing nothing in common. You will be hoping to draw your suit when making a check and avoiding your attributes opposite if you can. Drawing wit when making a vigor check, you will surely see you fail. Your character will have a numbered rank in each of these attributes, ranging from -1 to +5, with the higher ranks representing increasing prowess. You choose your ranks when you create your character, and will get to improve them over time by getting levels through your quests. Alright, simple enough.
Yep. So then we get to making a check. You reveal the top card of the deck to determine the outcome. First, the GM decides the attribute being checked and sets the value of the check difficulty, so basically your TN. You look for advantages to help your check, while the GM looks for disadvantages. These two cancel each other out. Reveal one card from the deck, then reveal extra cards for each advantage or disadvantage you have left. Use the best if advantaged and the worst if disadvantaged. Then add your card rank to your attribute and compare your total with the check difficulty to see if you succeed or fail. And lastly, you can exert yourself or your equipment to change failures into successes, or oppose successes into failures. So check difficulty is basically the target number. This is what you've got to beat in order to succeed at the action. the advantages and disadvantages, I'd say this would be the equivalent of situational pluses and minuses in other games. Each one adds an additional card that you draw, but depending on whether you have advantage or disadvantage determines whether you're using the highest or the lowest result. So
have we gotten a specification on if you shuffle them right back into the deck after each draw, or are you leaving them in a discard pile?
Given the infinite rule that's there earlier, I'd imagine I'd probably put it in a discard pile, and then when that runs out, shuffle. Otherwise, putting them at the bottom constantly could get a little bit impractical.
Because that's going to have an effect on, in this regard, just because advantage and disadvantage basically doing additional cards.
Mm-hmm.
If you get unlucky when you're getting advantages, you could run yourself out of good cards you'd want for later.
Now, what I am curious about is what would happen if you have, let's say, if you have two advantages after everything's said and done. But I'd imagine that all that it means is you just still draw the highest. Having multiple advantages or disadvantages just means multiple cards, but depending on which there's more of, is going to determine what you end up picking for the check. But then we have card rank. When you make a check, you reveal one or more cards from the top of the deck and add your attribute rank to the card's rank to find your total. A card's rank depends on its suit and if it's a court card. Its color determines if its rank adds to or subtracts from your attribute rank. Jacks, queens, kings, and aces are court cards, worth 2 ranks. Regular cards are worth 1 rank. Add the card's rank to your attribute if it matches your attribute's color. Add double if it matches your suit. So that would be the reason why. So I think we see the play here. Despite the size of the deck, you're only adding 1 or 2 points at most of the time. And I'd say at most you'd be adding 4, and that's if you get a court card that happens to match your suit. So the individual value for a lot of the 2 through 10 cards isn't as important as whether or not it matches the color and suit. I'd say that's a good way to simplify it, as well as make it so that the results don't get as chaotic as they could.
Yeah.
But
I'm entirely fine with this system. I kind of like it.
Now, if the card doesn't match your color, you subtract the card's ranks, so 1 or 2. And if it's the opposite suit, you subtract double. But jokers are wild court cards that always add or subtract 4 ranks as if they have a matching or opposite suit, depending on color. So that's why you have the whole red and black joker here. Revealed cards are then placed in a discard pile for that deck. Whenever a joker or the last card from the deck is discarded, all cards in that discard pile are shuffled back into the deck. So that answers that question.
Alright.
But then we have success and failure. If the total rank of your card plus attribute beats the check, you succeed. If not, you fail. If you succeed using a court card, or you manage to succeed using a card of the opposite color, you earn a critical success. If you fail using a court card, you earn a critical failure. So with a critical success, you succeed with a court card or a card of the opposite color. and you achieve your intent and earn an edge. Succeed is, well, success. Failure, the total is equal to or less than the check difficulty. You don't succeed, but you do earn an edge. And critical failure, you fail with a court card, and your opposition gains an edge.
Right. And for what edge actually is, when you fail or critically succeed at a check, you earn an edge. An edge is a shift of momentum in your favor, represented by a face-down card you take from the top of the deck and keep, but do not look at. You can only keep one edge at a time, but can give extras you earn to allies without one. You may use your edge to advantage yourself with any other check you make or check made against you. To do so, declare you are using the edge before the check is made, and use the face-down card as if it were another advantage. It cancels with disadvantage just the same, and is revealed for the check if it is still around. Whenever you use your turn to assist an ally, you may also give your edge to them as an extra advantage for their check. I like you can't just mass stock these,
No,
but being able to have that one is very nice.
Mm-hmm. And it's a case.
Then we get.
It is a case of if you got it, you better use it, or you might lose it.
But then we get double up. Some actions in the rules list an outcome in square brackets, such as make one move or deal 6 damage. When you critically succeed such an action, you may double the outcome listed in this way in place of earning an edge. Following the examples above, you can make 2 moves or deal 12 damage instead of earning an edge. This is another thing I really like. Because edge, say, towards the end of a battle, gaining that might not really matter. Which kind of would mean something like a critical success isn't going to matter. So being able to do this in place of that, or if you already have an edge you're holding on to for a little bit, I quite like this.
Oh yeah. And I'd say that so the degrees of success and failure are significantly easier here than it might be in other games. It is going to one thing that is going to determine that is what the suggested ranges are for check difficulties. Because
Yeah, we haven't seen those quite yet.
Mhm. A few of the examples have the check difficulty at 1, so I'd imagine even at high levels the check difficulty doesn't get that high. Like I have a hard time seeing the check difficulty get higher than 5 at the most.
That's something I think we'll probably figure out once we start looking at the characters and how those are made and how big your numbers actually may end up getting.
Doesn't seem like they're going to get that big though. But
the biggest I think is a +5 if I remember reading that right earlier.
But then we have exert. When you're on the edge of failure, you can choose to push yourself or your equipment to the limit in order to succeed. When you fail a check, you can ignore that failure and treat it as a success by exerting yourself or any equipment you use to make the check. You can even exert once to treat a critical failure as a failure, or exert twice to treat it as a success. Conversely, when a character succeeds in an action against you that you are aware of, you can exert yourself or your equipment to ignore the result of their success and treat it as a failure. You can even exert once to treat a critical success as a success, or exert twice to treat it as a failure. During conflicts, for example, exerting your armor against a critical attack can be necessary to survive. Know, though, that this will leave your armor broken, making you more vulnerable to future attacks. Note that when you exert, you are ignoring the success against you. This means the character acting against you does not suffer any repercussions as if they failed, does not earn an edge for a failure, and cannot exert themselves to change the outcome. One exception is that you cannot exert for all checks made during a parlay. Exerting yourself or your equipment during such social situations is synonymous with losing face and won't help you one bit. When you exert yourself, you become exerted. You mark the exerted condition on your sheet. Being exerted just prevents you from exerting yourself again until you take a rest. When you exert your equipment, it becomes broken. Mark the box next to it on your character sheet. Being broken means it cannot be used at all and no longer benefits you until it is repaired. You can only exert equipment that was involved with the action. This kind of thing kind of reminds me of the notion of role pushing that's in the Year Zero system, where you have it in that one. You have a chance to do a do-over, but if you fail again, the consequences are worse than if you didn't. It also means that, though, because of the setup, I'm curious how one would be able to exert multiple times, given the whole thing with the exerted condition. But I certainly like the approach, and it is a risk-reward setup, which I'm always big on.
Yeah, next we do have opposing checks. That's basically what you think it is in any system. Each of you do the card from the deck, bigger number wins. Then we get supply. Though it's not relevant to making regular checks, supply is an important feature of Legends of Avallen. Supply is a catch-all resource that represents the food, equipment, and provisions that you carry to survive in the world. You need supply to use some profession abilities, treat exertion with short rests, and stave off hunger with long rests. Supply is always treated as an ambiguous consumable resource. However, if you need a specific piece of adventuring equipment, you can expend one supply to add it to your inventory, such as a rope, piece of chalk, a tinderbox, or a torch. You will lose supply and have to carry the item around with you, so do this with caution. You can restock your supply by buying more in settlements. You can also find, trade for, or steal supply while adventuring, as well as share it amongst your party. And if you have the scavenger profession, you can make supply by scrapping other items. So they've really kind of... Wow, what's the word I'm looking for here? Wow, my mind is blank on a word I have used before, but it's not like a specific equipment system. Abstracted.
Yes.
That's the word. An abstracted equipment system.
I'm honestly fine with, because I do not feel a strong need to go back to tracking individual weight of each piece of equipment that someone is carrying.
Yes.
Then we have additional rules. Things like group order in conflicts. Basically, if it's not clear which group should go first, a character from each group makes a wit check. The character with the highest result has their group go first. Ties are broken by deciding at random who goes first. And we also have the notion of fate cards. Throughout the game, you'll find situations where the longer you remain, the more you tempt fate with complications, such as sneaking through an Imperial camp or exploring the wilds of the otherworld. When this is the case, the GM will introduce fate cards, which represent risk and the passage of time in tense scenes. When the GM includes fate cards in a scene, they will draw one card from the deck face down and place it in front of them at the beginning of each round of turns. When the GM draws the fourth fate card, they tempt fate to see if a complication arises. Resolve it if one does, discard those cards, and then draw another fate card to begin the count to 4 cards again. With Tempting Fate, the GM tempts Fate to see if a complication arises by revealing the 4 Fate cards one by one. If at least one Joker or 2 other court cards are revealed, a complication arises. This will happen about half the time. The color or suit of the last revealed court card determines for the GM which complication arises. If it's a Joker, the GM can choose any complications. So complications obviously are determined by the GM, but there are ways to do on-the-fly ones, such as making matters worse or making matters better. When a player aggravates the situation or does something that eases the tension. If they aggravate the situation, the GM may draw and reveal 4 fresh Fate cards to see if a complication arises, independent of any Fate cards they already have building up. Making matters better, whenever a character does something to ease the tension or risk in a situation, the GM may discard accumulated Fate cards from play. If they manage to get rid of the cause of a complication, then the GM should ignore that complication if it arises when they tempt Fate. And after that, we have a nice little rules reference sheet, which I'm going to zoom in a bit for. We have the checked, we have personal aspects, treatable conditions. I like having this, though. Maybe this thing should have been in the back rather than in the middle. Rest and recover.
I would prefer that, but I'll take it.
I will say that rest and recovery is done in a way that makes more sense here than it does in, say, D&D 5e. A short rest, you treat all treatable conditions, consume 1 supply, and give up any edges and concentration spells you have. A long rest treats all treatable conditions. If you have a recoverable or mortal condition, also make a recovery check. Consume 1 supply and sleep for 8 hours. Give up any edges or concentration spells you have. If you don't take a long rest between days, you become exhausted. And then we have the recovery check. Check Vigor or Spirit, which you cannot exert for. On a success, recover your least severe condition. Critical success, recover any 1 condition and gain an edge. Failure, become exerted but gain an edge. And critical failure, become exhausted. Exhausted is you cannot take short rests and your moves are reduced by 1 during conflicts and journeys. And sick is you cannot earn edges from checks. But we also have the setup special action, which is basically helping, and protect, which is, being the bodyguard. And given when it comes to movement, how it's just referred to as movement in spaces, this is going to be one of those cases where we're dealing with abstracted movement and not grid combat. Which might be blasphemous to some, but it does open up certain advantages, especially if you want to go more action movie with your set piece. But then we have attacking. Check the weapon's attack attribute, deal damage equal to the weapon's damage. Though because it's in brackets, it means that you can double up damage if you get an edge. If damage beats foe's armor rating, they become wounded. If damage doesn't beat foe's armor rating, you gain an edge. I do like that there's a lot of fail forward in this system. Even if you fail, it's not like you don't get anything from it. Let's see. Grapple. Grapple is an agility check. If you fail to begin one, your foe can exploit you. While grappling, you can only use small items, target others in the grapple, move by pushing the grappler with you. And an exploit, once per round at any time, you can make a melee attack or grapple against a vulnerable foe. They're vulnerable if they begin a turn in a space with no foes and you move into their space. They take an action that prevents them from keeping up their guard, or they fail to begin a grapple with you. And there's also the notion of spell casting, where it seems that you can boost a spell by giving yourself disadvantages. But
that said, I'm sure we'll get a bit more into that when we actually get to spell casting.
But the next few pages cover a sample adventure called Sealing Stone. And I do like this little behind the curtains thing that it goes into. So the patron of the quest, the motivation, the player motivation, the goal, task, and target, as well as the antagonist motivation, the location, and the description. That's a nice framework for setting up adventures. But then we have the player's intro, we have our first NPC, and I'm skimming through a lot of that part because, you know, it's a module.
We got a bunch of pre-made characters here.
Yeah, I will note that I absolutely adore the art that we've got here. But then close to the back we have the pre-gens. And this is definitely a case where normally I wouldn't be the biggest fan of insisting on a one-page sheet, but this I think is a game that can get away with it.
The only thing I'm really gonna say negatively here is I wish we had a little bit more on spells. Because I really don't have much of an idea of how those work and function. It's a bit of a minor issue, though. This is just a quick start.
And I do like that it's going with this icon kind of approach. It's definitely going to make things easier.
And there are obviously things on this sheet that weren't really covered, like virtue and flaw. I'm not sure what those really impact.
I think that's more for characterization. Yeah. We also have the whole thing with supply, where it's you start with 4 supplies, and managing that is going to be key. So, given the fact that there isn't a HP value, I feel like it's going to be a case of you're wounded, then withering, but it doesn't outright say. It also doesn't say what things like Muse is. I do like that the character archetype or class or whatnot or profession is summed up on these little cards. But that more or less sums up the pre-gens when it comes to Legends of Avallen.
There's a few things I would like a bit more detail on, even though it is a quick start, but at the same time, we do have a good idea of how the system's going to play out.
Mm-hmm.
it does seem there's a lot of options you have. I forget what the numbers were where they said how many professions and whatnot there were at the beginning, but I do remember it being a pretty sizable number.
Yeah, the professions in the core book that I'm looking at are alchemist, bard, crafter, merchant, priest, scavenger, scribe, socialite, tamer, and thief. Uh, but there are other there are other ones that are available for warriors and for reavers, as well as mystics and mage.
This does also give me the impression of being a somewhat lighter system in terms of mechanics.
Yeah.
Not, say, beer and pretzels light, but there's not a whole lot of stuff you're going to have to keep track of compared to some other games.
Mm-hmm. So, which certainly has its has its benefits. And I should note, when it comes to the profession school, is the stuff you start out with, but there's other stuff that you could potentially get down the road. And the full character sheet is a 2-page affair that also has the inventory part. But when you start out with a profession at level 1. When you get to level 2, you get your first class. There are 2 martial classes, warrior and reaver, and 2 magical classes, mage and mystic. When you reach level 5, you get a legendary path, which, the way they describe it is that you start to become a mythical archetype from Valak and Raxian folklore, which kind of makes me think of the epic destinies from D&D 4th edition. But there are 5 tiers. Apprentices levels 1 to 3. Adventurers is 4 through 6. Veteran is 7 through 9. Hero is 10 through 12. And Legend is 13 through 15. So you could kind of look at it as a 3-act play for each of the tiers. And in that regard, I'd say it does a better job than some do with the whole multiple tier thing. And even with that, each of the classes has certain specializations. But the legendary paths are things like Druid, Feely, Gladiator, Primus, Slayer. But one thing that I'm looking for is some sort of is, first off, let's see if we can find the way magic is going to work. Here it is. So obviously magic is used through spells, which come from spell schools, but often default to a single target that you have to touch. The number given in parentheses at the beginning of the spell's description is its complexity. A spell's complexity grants that many disadvantages to casting it. You may also raise a spell's complexity to increase its range and scope. Some spells also list concentration after their complexity. These can be maintained over time by expending an advantage on them on each of your turns. So for example, the dispel magic spell has a complexity of 1. You end 1 concentration spell or bound unshapen that you know and give an edge to your an ally within range. But there was the notion of adding more complexity to boost the effects of spells. So I'd say if you're playing a mage, you really, really, really want to have as many advantages as you can get. Because remember that complexity gives you disadvantages. There was also a concept of wealth and renown that was a shared thing. But one thing I'm trying to I'm just going to do a search on this. Because there was that thing about muses in. Okay, so all that a muse is just a shield in that a magic version of a shield. It's probably an equipment. Here it is. So a shield can be used once per round to defend against a weapon attack. You can also exert a shield against an attack you use its advantage for. It basically allows you to get advantage against an attack. And muses work in a similar fashion. It's just bigger. A buckler gives you advantage against 1 melee attack per round. A round shield against a melee or ranged attack, and a tower shield against a melee or ranged attack. So I'd say that's a better approach to shields than I've seen some games do, where its number go up. But overall, what do you think of what we have with Legends of Avallen?
I think there's a lot of interesting stuff here.
Mm-hmm.
I think they handled the card-based mechanics quite well. Again, just because it does mention some stuff, I don't like some of that spell stuff in the quick starter, or since the muse was on the sheets, a little bit of that in the quick start.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, it's a solid premise. I can't really find any holes to poke in what we have so far.
Yeah.
It had me interested in checking the whole book.
If I have to really stretch and nitpick, maybe providing some sort of guideline on what the suggested range when it comes to check difficulty is. I have a feeling the default is 1, and more complex
I'm
ones
sure
would
the
be...
adventure that it gave us, if we actually went through adventures, since these are all just the level 1 characters, would be kind of the guideline intended.
Mhm.
So I'm not going to kind of hit this for not having that because it has that adventure. But I do hope in the actual core book it has it.
Yeah, and I'm... So, I'm looking at the core book right now. Let's see. It says that if a check involves interacting with the environment rather than another character, it's set by the scene difficulty, which is decided by the situation and the tier of play. So let me see. Let me see tier of. Let me see tier of play. So given the tiers of play setup that I went into earlier, I think the range is supposed to be 1 to 5.
Which would make sense is, I believe, if you go all the way up to a +5 on the stat, +4 from something, the highest you could possibly get is a 9.
Mm-hmm.
At the highest level of play with the perfect draw.
Yeah, which would mean you'd have to get a court card that matches your suit. Which, picking a matching color is going to be a 50-50. Picking a... Back that... So the odds of picking a red-faced card is 6 out of 52. Which, let me do a little bit of math. So 11.5%. So this does mean that getting a crit has more of a 10% chance instead of a 5%, but it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah. We've also got other things to consider, like until that discard pile shuffles back in, depending on what you may or may not have dumped out from advantages and disadvantages, that's going to mess with the numbers. So it's not going to consistently be that.
This does mean that you couldn't really say I could make this check. I have a 5% chance of succeeding.
Yeah.
And because that is assuming a fresh deck of cards.
Yeah.
You are only going to have a fresh deck of cards at the very start of the session before anyone's made any checks.
Yeah. Yeah, the not always shuffling back in and additional used for advantage, disadvantage does weird things to how the statistics on your draws are going to work. But that number you gave first, in general, is going to be good enough for most people. Getting into the weeds on the numbers probably isn't going to make that much of a difference.
I do like in the GM's guide for the full book, there is a little chart that you can use to randomly generate quests if you need to.
Those are always nice if your DM hasn't had time to put something together.
Mm-hmm. And I'd say it would be easier to do pickup when it comes to a game like this compared to ones that have a bit more of a simulationist attitude. They also have a similar thing for generating settlements, which is going to be very nice if you're doing a keep on the borderlands kind of campaign. Also, I did check. There is a thing in the GM section of the full book. So the environment CD is 0 to 1 at apprentice tier. Then it goes 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and 4 to 5. Of course, keep in mind that is a base range difficulty, but I think it shows that we were close to the mark with what we were thinking.
Yeah.
But I do hope to go into more detail on the full book down the road, but that won't happen for a bit. That won't happen for a bit. So with that in mind, this is as good a time as any to go into what we've got planned for this month. So you've mentioned you're not going to be here next week. You're going to be.
I will be in Anime Matsuri in Texas.
Hmm.
Ought to be fun.
You learned your lesson from last time because you're not going cosplaying as Kefka in the hot sun.
Look, what were the odds the only day I was Kefka was the only day there was an extreme heat warning? What were the odds of that happening?
Same odds as Mother Nature being on the drugs. So that's probably going to be a play things by ear kind of day. Next week is going to be significantly more open than previous weeks, anyways. And the week afterwards, on the 17th, we are going to be doing our next full season. This time covering Daggerheart. And I know a lot of people have already made their takes on Daggerheart. I wanted to wait a bit for a few very specific reasons. One of them is I did not want to look at this in the Critical Role RPG kind of way. That's the first thing. Second, I feel like a lot of people were looking at it due to the hype machine around that aforementioned fact, and I feel like looking at something just because it's a popular thing in the conversation taints things. And something I've tried to do as best as I can with this is to look at given works with as neutral as a perspective as I can. I don't always succeed at it, but I try. So that's the reason why I decided to wait a bit. There's also the fact that right when Daggerheart launched, we were in the middle of doing Megalos, and despite some very strong temptations, I wasn't keen to just drop Megalos and jump on another thing.
Yeah.
That is a hang-up of mine. I don't like dropping something midway through to jump on something else. Even when it comes to food, I am that person who will finish one part of the plate and then move right onto the next part. Like, you give me a burger and fries, and I will go through all of the fries first and then go to the burger.
Well, obviously, you start with the fries. Those are much better warmer. They lose much more quality as they cool down than the burger does.
Yeah, but even if I'm doing like steak and salad or something, or anything that involves having the plate sectioned off.
I do the exact same thing. You're fine.
Oh, does that mean I do that with things that are built in a bowl, like a thing of ramen or udon, or like? No, because there's nothing to section off. But that is a story for another time. I will be doing a bit of a Q&A with Loon, since Loon wants to learn more about Sword World, and I'm not going to say I'm the biggest expert, but I have some experience, just a bit. So please look forward to that tomorrow. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.
Soi